We're joined on the phone line by Professor Berry Hanyane, political analyst and a professor with the University of the Northwest. Professor Hanyane, good evening to you and thank you for joining us. Do you think this is indicative of Helen Zille losing the majority support within the Democratic Alliance?
Good evening, Cindy. Good evening to Prof. Good evening to your viewers. Look, I don't think so. I think this speaks to a number of factors. One, that perhaps there are gaps in relation to establishing some measure of intellectual engagement within the DA. I am not of the idea that this will in any way dent the prospects of not retaining Western Cape in 2019 and going forward, or let alone create some serious dent in the image and the brand called DA. It's more of an intellectual and an internal strife that needs to be managed well. And I must admit that I'm impressed at the level of the arguments advanced today in your channel in particular by Helen Zille, who seemed calm, relaxed, and providing more intellectual impetus than just trading emotional blows with everyone else around her.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, she was very gracious to even take our call. We joined on the line. Please stay on the line, Professor Hanyane. Kaya Magadla is the ANC Western Cape acting chairperson, joins us on the line. Mr. Magadla, just your reaction to the suspension by the DA and the looming or imminent disciplinary hearing on Friday. Do you think this is a smokescreen or do they take this matter seriously? Mr. Magadla, can you hear me? All right, well, ask Musiri in studio. I think we're still having problems with our phone lines. There, Musiri Tsiane from the South African Liberty Foundation. Good evening to you. And Volshe Gekwane is National Black Business Caucus president. Just, is this for you a smokescreen, or do you think this matter will see the dismissal or removal of Helen Zille?
Well, I take it to be a smokescreen. I really don't believe that there is a clear intention. If anything else, it's a clear publicity stance that is taken by the DA. They're trying to get attention that they are able to deal with a particular leader for even make utterances that generally most of the DA members, if not voters, believe in. That their supporters in general believe that colonialism was the best thing that ever happened to South Africa. I mean, you know, talk is cheap about having to take an action, discipline a member. We're not interested in that ourselves. What we're clearly interested in is how do you make sure that the wrongs that were done are now corrected. Talk about that and say that if for argument's sake, Musima Imani were to stand up and say as DA, these are the things that we wish should happen to South Africa. These are the things that we want to reimburse the wrongs that we have done, that the wrongs that were done by the colonialists themselves, that as DA we're pushing for XYZ, for the land to be returned to the people, for the wealth of this country to be returned to the people, that the economy of South Africa should belong to the people. Now, once you talk that, otherwise this is nothing. Taking a person for having uttered what you all believe in. It's not only her herself. In actual fact, she even stated in her own statement that majority of black people that she knows believe in this. That colonialism was the best thing that ever happened to South Africa. I will take it that even Musima Imani believes in that too. So this is just nothing else but publicity, taking a stand, having to catch up the headlines. It is of no interest to us.
I mean, Tsepo Khadima makes a very interesting point that, you know, by virtue of the seriousness of this matter, the party finding or deeming it serious enough to suspend her, would suggest that they feel there's a prima facie or strong case to discipline the former leader, Helen Zille, albeit that she retains a position as Western Cape Premier. So question is this the imminent demise or the end of Helen Zille's career, and what impact would that have on the core voter base of the DA? Volshe?
Well, first of all, I think this whole issue of colonization being good for African people is utter nonsense. the DA has always been the way it is today. Nothing has changed now. This belief of that colonization assisted us with something is utter rubbish. So we sit here and we see utterances of this nature all the time coming from members of the DA and people affiliated to the DA. But the truth is, as Africans, we had civilizations long time ago, and there's no evidence that we would never have advanced should we have not been interrupted. In fact, we have regressed in progress. So I think the DA, you know, what would happen to the DA if Helen Zille, she's been suspended, but she's still the premier, and she's saying that she was elected by the people, which is utter nonsense because the party system is what operates in South Africa. So if the party was serious, they would pull her from that position. They would call her back. But they haven't, because they don't see anything wrong with what she said, actually. It's just a facade to keep us thinking that they're doing something about it. And poor Maimane, who thinks he's running something, is running absolutely nothing there. He's just, you know, a mascot to bring black people to the party so they can get votes.
Let's say on a procedural issues rather that Helen Zille issued. It is online on her Twitter official handle in terms of what she deems to be irregular, in the sense that this decision was prejudged, and obviously that would suggest discrimination on her part before the process was even ventilated. Mfundo Mabalane, my colleagues, is standing by in our newsroom live. Mfundo, good evening to you. Just take us through the key points of Helen Zille's letter in defense of her suspension.
Good evening, Cindy. You know, this is in fact the 9-page report, rather the response by Helen Zille, and she clearly is still fighting for her political life with everything that talks that this could signal the end. She really has gone to fight for survival. Now, she talks firstly of the procedural issues here, that when the leader made the announcement that she would be suspended, this was contradictory to what was said to her, or rather a letter that was written to her by the FedEx. James South had written that she was given an opportunity until the 6th to make representations of why she should not. But now it was something that was immediate. So she talks about that there clearly was some sort of a preconceived or prejudgment. There was a decision taken to suspend her, but she is not really of the view or knows the reasons why they would have that prejudgment. And then beyond, she goes on to talk about an article from the 4th by Sunday Times, where they also were of the view that this was a decision that was taken beforehand. And then she goes on to talk about the initial material failure to comply with due process, and the fact that this has serious implications because of the leader's public statements. And for that reason, she doesn't believe in this process, that she already knows what the outcome would be. And then beyond that, she goes in to talk on the grounds for the intention to suspend her. Now, there are 4 facts that she responds to here. The first one being the serious matter, that this is a serious matter and therefore the party needed to demonstrate so by suspending her. But then she goes on to question the party to say, if indeed this is a serious matter, why was I not suspended from the onset on the 2nd of April when I was charged? Which is a pertinent question for some, because if you are charged, you should be suspended. But then again, it would possibly be argued that they watched the response when she wasn't suspended. But James Self, she mentions that James Self was actually questioned on the matter to say, why has she not been suspended? And he went on to say that within the DA, the process is we do not suspend somebody unless we believe they can interfere with witnesses. But in this case, Helen Zille could not interfere. And then she argues that very point and says if James Self could go and speak at a television interview or radio interview and stress that I cannot really interfere with witnesses, how then do they decide to suspend me after the fact when I've already been charged? So those are some of the points that she raises here. And she says that definitely she would not be one to try to interfere with witnesses nevertheless, because the type of case that she is now fighting is one where she expressed herself on social media, so there are no witnesses for her to interfere with. And then beyond this, she goes on to touch that she sees that there's a broader campaign to have her resign, and perhaps that what is happening now is as a result of her refusal to actually admit or acknowledge or take some sort of blame for what has happened. She says what has subsequently happened with the Democratic Alliance is as a result of the Democratic Alliance itself and some people within the DA that have gone on to speak publicly on the matter when she has complied with what they have requested, which was some sort of a gag order. She was told not to speak on the matter. She goes on to outline the number of interviews she's been asked to respond or to talk about the matter, but she was instructed by the leader of the party not to speak, which she complied with. But she stresses that there are some within the DA that go on to still speak on the matter, and she has suffered reputational damage in that respect because she hasn't been able to respond until this very moment. So those are some of the issues that she talks to, but really the pertinent one is procedure. That's the one that she's more concerned about, and she believes this whole suspension is a sham, and already they know what exactly they want from her, but certainly she will not be resigning if the resignation is what they seek from her.
All right, Mfundo, thank you so much. And that's the response on the procedural issues that Helen Zille had raised with regards to the processes that have been followed that emanated in her suspension. We're joined on the line now by the Democratic Alliance Federal Executive Chairman, James Self. Good evening to you and welcome to Africa News Network. Just the response from Helen Zille after the suspension announcement has been made, citing some technical irregularities in the processes that were followed. Do you think this will impact, of course, on the the DC come on Friday?
No, I don't think so. And we carefully considered Ms. Zille's objections to the procedure that was followed. We do not believe that there was any or much substance in them. To the extent that there was an issue, we corrected that issue. And so I don't think there's any serious problem going forward to the DC.
She also cites the fact that this is, in a way, the party or certain people in the party trying to force her to resign, which is something that she will not do. And how does this then translate into the dynamics within the party, having to appease certain groups and the public image, reputational damage that has been caused?
Well, in our view, we try and do the right thing, not the popular thing. So what we did was to take all the factors into account in our decision to suspend Ms. Zille. We are not suspending her as the Premier. We can't suspend her as the Premier. There is no question of her resigning as the Premier. Basically, what we want to do is we want this matter to go before the disciplinary committee. We have a lot of faith in our institutions, and we believe that the process will be fair, and we will abide by whatever the outcome is that comes out of that disciplinary committee.
Yeah, the unintended consequences, of course, had been with Mmusi Maimane announcing a suspension and the party coming, or the FedEx saying that it was a temporary suspension. Now today we know that it's an official suspension. Do you think that the miscommunication there could potentially damage or rather even cast a suspicion on how the process has been followed?
Well, in our view, there was a simple misunderstanding, and what was the important communication was the one that went to Ms. Zille herself, that was issued by me, and the confusion was very quickly corrected, and so I really don't think that that a great deal hangs on it. It was something that we moved beyond, and we are now awaiting the outcome of, the beginning of the disciplinary proceedings. And as I said, we have every faith that that will be both free and fair.
Yeah, but Helen Zille makes the point in her response that the FedEx had violated the party's constitution by rejecting the mandatory requirements for mediation with her and the number of other technicalities or irregularities that she cites. So obviously this would have to be considered in the disciplinary hearing.
No, those were considered by the Federal Executive today, and quite frankly, they're not actually accurate. Ms. Zille is quoting from another section of the Constitution, not the one under which she was suspended. But be that as it may, we did provide her with the opportunity to make representations. She did make such representation. We did consider those representations very clearly, and we did decide that she should be suspended.
All right, Mr. South, please stay on the line. We have Professor Sipho Siepe and Mosiri Tsiane and Volshekh Ekwane who would like to also engage in this matter. A very difficult position the party finds itself in.
Well, I think this was long coming, and I think what the DA has decided to do is to provide clarity about where it is going. It was always going to be difficult to have a leader. You know, one of the things that Tony Leon mentioned, he says when he stepped down, he also stepped aside. So that gave Helen Zille almost a free rein. So what you had here was a view that said you have a leader, but you also have somebody who holds a state power in terms of being a leader who is in government and holds certain powers and can affect the agenda of the DA, which agenda they'll then later use to say where we govern, we do better. Yeah. So the issue for them was...
Professor Siepe, Mr. South has to go. So is there a particular question you'd like to pose?
No. For some of us, the issue is not so much about what Helen Zille has said. Is what people have raised is what... If the tweet is found to be objectionable, then the DA must do better than simply suspending Helen Zille, must also talk about the consequences of that colonialism and how they are going to address the legacies of those colonialism. If it was bad, then the legacy, they must be seen to be dealing with it forthrightly. The issues of land, they must be very clear about it. The issue of disadvantage and all that. So the South Africans are less interested in the fate of Helen Zille. They are interested in making sure that we reverse the impact of colonialism on South Africans.
All right, Mr. South, I hope you got that question. Quite a loaded one, but in terms of, the preamble, of course, was the tweet from Ms. Zille.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Democratic Alliance is in the process of a very major and comprehensive policy review, which will start to take place at our Federal Council meeting later this month. And many of the questions that Professor Siepe raises will indeed be traversed during that policy review. So we welcome the opportunity to engage in this debate, but preferably not through a 140-character tweet. These questions that he raises are very complex. They're very the resolution requires a great deal of subtlety and nuance, and we will deal with these debates internally without resorting to any simplification of what are very, very complex issues.
Just a follow-up on that, James. The issue of that I also raised with Helen Zille is where people hold different views and beliefs, and they hold them honestly, and because they come from different premises. What room exists in the DA? Because it could be, and Helen could argue, that what you're doing, you are suppressing the expression of beliefs and perspectives.
Yes, I'm familiar with the argument, and the Democratic Alliance provides literally dozens of platforms at which such debates can take place. But they take place within the party and not on social media, and because once one puts something out on social media that is potentially controversial or has the potential to be misunderstood, then one is forced to justify it. And then the whole thing becomes an issue of whether you're for or against a particular point of view that, as I said, is very complex, very nuanced, and requires a great deal of very detailed debate. But platforms there are within the party to debate them, but just not on social media and not with those sorts of consequences.
Yeah, but not to labour the point around the procedural fairness of the suspension. We spoke to Helen Zille earlier, and she still laments the fact that the whole suspension was prejudged, and that the process disadvantaged her in that the suspension wasn't made immediately after she was charged.
Yes, that is true, but that was before this thing became an issue in the public media and an issue within the structures of the party. If the matter had become de-escalated, if everybody had refrained from commenting and taking positions on it, it would presumably not have been necessary for us to have taken the action that we've taken. But unfortunately, the issue became very heated within the party itself. The tweets and the subsequent controversy became proxies for other debates within the party. And I don't think, in all fairness, that it served the interests of her or of the process of internal justice within our party for those sorts of debates to take place. And what we have now done is to seek to isolate and insulate them so that the trial can go ahead in a calm and purposeful way.
And what's your response to the comment from one of our analysts saying that essentially Helen Zille is no longer a member of the DA in good standing, at least, and that she shouldn't be representing the party at a provincial level?
Well, that's absolute nonsense, actually, because all we've done is we have temporarily suspended Helen Zille from participation in party activities. That is all we've done, and it in no way delegitimizes her position as the Premier of the Western Cape. And the issue on which she is being charged is completely different from her stellar performance as the Premier of the Western Cape. So it's very important for people to understand that it is a defined basis or a very confined basis on which we take issue with what she said and did.
Please stay on the line, Mr. Self. Very briefly, Vosha.
Just 2 points there. You said just now that the reason why you've taken this decision to suspend is because this has become something in the media, and it's became an issue within the party structure. So is that then to make us understand that aside from it having been something that's all over the media and becoming an issue in the public space, the DA would not have seen something wrong with that statement? So that is a concern, one, from what you've just said now. Two, you are saying that, let me just finish, you are saying that her participation as a Premier of the Western Cape is in no way affected by the behavior or the tweet or whatever her belief structure is. Now, I put it to you, though, that if the DA feels that she is okay to be a Premier, someone who believes that the enslavement, the inhuman torture of our people in the past is somewhat beneficial to us, how can that person lead a province? If that is a belief, if that's the reason why you've suspended her, because you disagree with that belief, if she is in charge of a province and she believes that, is that not detrimental to the people of the province?
Well, the two issues are completely different, and with respect, you are conflating two issues. The first issue is we are not able, even had we wanted to suspend her as the Premier of the Western Cape. We don't have that power in our Constitution, and it would have been illegal for us to have done so. There are only two ways in which you can get rid of a constitutionally elected office bearer, and one is by terminating that person's membership, and the other one is by moving a motion of no confidence. That is why, presumably, the ANC is finding it difficult to get rid of President Zuma. So what we say is, yes, the tweets were objectionable. We profoundly disagree with them. They caused deep offense, not only to millions of South Africans, but also to the party leadership, and they were totally unacceptable. But that is the basis on which a disciplinary procedure is taking place. if that disciplinary procedure were to find, A, that she had committed misconduct, and B, that an appropriate sanction would be the termination of her membership, then she might putatively be removed as the Premier of the Western Cape. But that would be prejudging the matter, exactly what Premier Zille is recusing us wrongly, I believe, of doing in the matter of her suspension.
When can we, Mr. Self, just very quickly, when can we expect the outcome of the disciplinary hearing?
Well, the disciplinary hearing starts on Friday, but as I emphasized earlier, I don't have any control over it. It's an independent institution. It's run by different people, and it will take its own course in its own way and come to its own conclusion. And once it's done that, we will then be able to consider the matter anew.
All right, thank you so much. That is the Democratic Alliance Federal Executive Chairman, James Self, speaking to us on the phone line. We joined now via Skype by Thandi Smith, Media Monitoring Africa. Thandi, thanks so much for your time. Of course, the power and the universe of social media cannot be discounted in how the course of events have changed. We heard from the DA's FedEx chairman admitting that had it not been for the pressure and the media outcry and the reaction from the public generally, probably very little action would have been taken from the DA.
Yes, thanks for having me. You know, it's a very interesting comment that was made on exactly that point, saying that, you know, if there hadn't been the response that we had seen on social media, there may have been a different course of action that was taken, if any. And, you know, that just, as you say correctly, just shows the power and the magnitude of social media. And I think that we are only starting to grapple with the issues and grapple with this idea that things that we say on a public platform, such as social media, can go instantly viral and have negative impact if the content is in question.
Yeah, but then how do you test the sincerity, I suppose, of the process if it were an external influence that had forced the party's hand?
You know, I can't really comment on the process and you know, DA's internal policies on these issues. But I think that what I can say is that, you know, because it was a public platform and because of Helen Zille being a person in the public eye, that I don't think that she could have said these things or said what she said on Twitter or social media without it taking the course that it did. You know, I think that it's possibly a good thing that this is happening, because if these are the ideas and the thoughts that are being had, that they should be addressed and we should have debates and they should be, you know, argued and grappled with, because I think it's a really important issue that needs to be spoken about.
All right, please stay with us, Thandi. We have Njabulo Nzuza, the General Secretary of the ANC Youth League. Good evening to you, and thanks for joining us here on Africa News Network. Your response and reaction to the DA suspending Helen Zille?
Well, firstly, I think the whole debacle exposes the hypocrisy in the Democratic Alliance. You must remember they have consistently called for people who have not been taken through a due process to resign or either step aside. Such was being led by Helen Zille. Today, it is the very same Helen Zille who is today screaming about saying let due processes follow. What you have in the Democratic Alliance is an organization that promotes white supremacy, and they are now failing to handle it, and it is starting to creep up their leaders because there has not been action that is being taken. You must remember, this is not for the first time we've had racist statements being made by leaders of the DA. And some of them are still executing their rights. They are still working for government. They are still deployed by the DA because the DA sees no need to act against racists. So that is the fundamental issue. When they are promoting colonialism, it is because they have become so bold that they think they can say colonialism was correct in the current dispensation. Now they are saying we must continue to live in poverty. Our people must continue to suffer as they suffered under their apartheid rule that they promote as a democratic alliance.
We heard from Mr. James Self saying that they are revising their policy or position or ideology, even if you will, in terms of dealing with issues of redress and injustices of the past, primarily on land and wealth redistribution.
Well, that's an issue that says they are only seeing the need now. 23 years into democracy, it's only now that they are seeing that policies of the ANC is actually a direction that they themselves should be taking, which are policies that seek to better the lives of our people. So all along, they have not seen a need for them to revise their policies. They are only seeing this now because there is public pressure, there is media pressure on them to start behaving in a certain way. It proves the contention that we have always had, that racist organizations did not give away this country because they believe that we must move to a rainbow nation, but it was because of pressure. Even today, they are starting to change their tune because of pressure that is exerted on them. Other than that, they remain a white supremacist organization that undermines their leader on the basis of the color of his skin.
All right, please stay on the line. And Jabulo, Mosiri, just in terms of internal processes, and this is something that James Self had raised, in the sense that, you know, similarly as the ANC has got its own structure and processes in removing or removing a leader, we need to afford other parties to do the same. So with those words, for me, it is almost an indication that Helen Zille will come out of this unscathed. Well,
she will. One thing one can say is that they can be trusted. It's a simple statement. You can't trust DA. I mean, apart from the process that they're talking about, here is a person who says on national TV that we took this matter serious because there was a reaction in public. It means a crime is not a crime up until there is a reaction. If there is a multitude of reaction, now you've committed an offense. In our view, that's what DA says. In our view, you've done nothing wrong. The wrong that you've done is that you have sparked an interest. That's your wrong. You shouldn't have done that. But we don't mind what you're saying. Colonialism was the best thing that has happened. In terms of the procedure that they're talking about, listen, there is nothing that is happening here. You can't. She says to. Actually, he says, the leader of DA says to national TV and say, Helen Zille remains a member in good standing. It's not my words. That's what he says. He says, she remains a member in good standing. Having uttered those words, it means you've got to say that colonialism is the best thing that ever has happened to South Africa, and you are a member in good standing. What are they doing? They're playing us off.
Professor Seb.
Well, I think in the long run, we'll actually thank Helen Zille for raising this debate. And in a sense, her misspeaking in public and also her Twitter habits has helped us to see the DA for what it is. And I'm also convinced that Helen Zille can persuasively argue that the views that I've held, that I've expressed, are views that you guys know that I've always had. What you are doing now is that you are succumbing to pressure. And she can point out a number of times that I've said this and this. So the point that I'm making is that they have to deal with the issue of not simply saying the tweets are wrong, but to also to say if they are wrong, there are implications. There must be consequences to their posture. Then they must say, let us look at what colonialism has actually done. And this is the position. But to their credit, James Self was also acknowledging what the Youth League was saying, that it's only now that we're now going to be looking at this issue because they are complex. I mean, those were his words. But it is good that Helen Zille has forced us and forced the DA to now come to the new South Africa, that some perspectives cannot be right, and that it's also important for you to be sensitive. It doesn't matter how you hold a particular view strongly, but they must also deal with the issue of they are the ones who talk about the freedom of expression. It could be argued that Helen Zille was expressing her view, and that would be also one of the defense that she's going to put.
Yeah, but also, I don't know if the DA would have considered the consequences of attracting woke, intelligent professionals, black, who happen to be black, in that there's certain things that you can and cannot do that will offend people based on their racial disposition or socialization. So we've seen what the reaction came from the top black leadership of the DA condemning the tweets, and subsequent to that, some action had to be taken. Do you think they had prepared or anticipated these kind of dynamics coming into the party?
But I think before you come, I think you're being generous on that, because we still don't know whether the DA, this is a conflict of whiteness, the way they want to Zille out. They could be fighting that. Or whether it is the support for the views that are held by Musi. Because that will still be something that, if that is a support for Musi's ideas, then all the issues that we raise, Musi must address them to say, having condemned colonialism, these are now the positions that come as a consequence of that. So before we actually give him a free pass, we need to actually say these are the headers. Because
so you're saying I'm being charitable. Please
yes,
give an opportunity.
I think first of all, the concern, you know, the Youth League is right. This is not the first time we hear this kind of horrific statements coming from DA members. And also, we must be careful. Are we looking at Musi Maimane as a representative of black people in a white party? Is that what's happening at the DA? Because that's a problematic thing in itself. If at all, the white people in the DA believed that colonization was good for us, which is utter rubbish, by the way. It was not good for us. Because I heard an interview on radio with Helen Zille, where she says that a genocide is different to colonization, which I don't know what that means. She says that the Jews during the Holocaust was a more serious issue than the colonization, which is utter nonsense, because a lot of our people...
She did say, you know, in her words, so, you know, and she says age does come to play in some of these things.
No, but that age must not come and belittle what our people have gone through for so many hundred years. And when she says that, I would want to know, does it mean that you can say at some point that the Holocaust was somewhat good for the Jews? You can't, that cannot be uttered, because that's horrible. But for black people, no, it's okay. For Africans to have been colonized, it's okay. No, it's not.
Yeah, let's just bring in Jabula. I mean, we know what the opposition and capitalizing, leveraging on the cracks in the ANC, the factionalism, etc., that some could argue that this is the reaction from the ANC. It is expected to make a feast of what is going on in the DA currently.
Making a feast out of the current situation. Remember, as ANC Youth League, at some point we marched to the offices of the DA when there was an instance of Kola Banat. And the DA did not act because there was less media attention on the issue. So we have long been saying the DA is not good for the country, because the DA is an institution that breeds and protects racism within it. And James Self confirms that today when he says, no, these things are normal in the party. The problem is that they've just drawn too much attention, and therefore that is why we must act on it. It is not about the ANC actually riding a high horse on this issue, but it is an issue of the ANC also having to fight for non-racialism in South Africa. You must remember that one of the basic founding principles of the ANC was non-racialism, where we fight racism wherever it shows its ugly head. And here we have a person who's been given to run a province by the DA, and the DA is saying they are not going to do anything because the Constitution does not allow them to do anything. Look at the hypocrisy in that. How long has the DA been calling for people to be suspended without due process being followed? So why must they then follow due process on this one? They are supposed to act as they talk.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That's Njabolo Nzuza. He's the Secretary General of the ANC Youth League, joining us on the line. DA's Federal Executive Chairman, James Self, joined us earlier. Mosiri Tsianes from the South African Liberty Foundation. And we also have Professor Sipho Siepe in studio, and Vol Scheer, Khaekwane is the National Black Business Caucus president, or CEO rather, and Thandi Smith is media monitoring Africa, joining us via Skype. And we had my colleague Mfundo Mabalane also giving us the response from Helen Zille in terms of the procedures prior to her suspension. We take a quick ad break. We'll see you shortly.